Okay, got it.
Good morning. Allison Skalberg here, Consolidated Planning Group. We are excited and honored to have our special guest here with us today, Temple Grandin. And so we're just going to do kind of a brief format here with Temple. I know that, Temple, you're certainly not a stranger to many people, especially in the agriculture community as well as the autism community. You're a well-known entity and powerhouse, but we're excited to be back here with you today and want to learn a little bit more about you. I think one of the biggest and interesting things that I think about when I think about you, Temple, is your life and the path that you have gone down, and the successes, the many successes that you've had in life, despite a diagnosis of autism. You've done some really great things in your life. Tell me, how old were you when you were diagnosed with autism?
Well, I had severe speech delay. I did not talk until age 4. Fortunately, I got into a very good speech therapy program at age 2.5 that 2 teachers taught out of their home, and a lot of emphasis on learning speech, and it talked slowly to me so I could hear it, teaching the child turn taking, teaching them how to wait and take turns, really important, then teaching skills like eating with utensils, like putting your coat on, basic skills. And I liked going to therapy. I think that's important. When you're working with the real little kids, I want progress in speech, turn taking, and skills. I don't put very much emphasis on eye contact. That can come later.
Well, one thing that I think when I think about you, Temple, is how cutting edge or leading your mother must have been. With where you came from way back, and the insight that she had to get you in therapy and help, and growing those skills early on. And so you would say that was very instrumental in your success that you've seen throughout your life and today.
Well, that's right. But fortunately, one of the first doctors Mother went to was a neurologist, not a psychiatrist, a neurologist, who also was ahead of his time. Another place where Mother really helped me, she taught me to read at age 8. And she just taught me with phonics, sounding out the Wizard of Oz book out loud. Real simple. And that was what was done with me. Also being raised in the 50s, kids played outside, all that kind of stuff. Also, social rules in the 50s were taught, the method I call teachable moments. If I forgot to say please, she'd cue me, but so did the other parents in the neighborhood. You forgot to say please. Or let's say we're sitting at the table and I reach across the table to grab the serving dish. Mother didn't scream no. She said, ask your sister to pass it. She gave the instruction. But that also was standard 50s upbringing, because you go into the neighbor's house, Mrs. Wood would say the same thing to me. You gave the instruction. You kids were taught basic social stuff and politeness, one specific example at a time in teachable moments.
Yeah, that is so true, and things have really emerged or changed, through the years in parenting and things like that. Maybe not to the benefit of others. So one of the things I watched the movie based on your life, the Temple Grandin movie. I watched it with my girls. It was probably 15 years ago. One of the best movies. I just really touched us.
Your video is frozen. Your video is
okay.
frozen.
So yes, my
turn your camera off before you crash my router.
Okay. Okay, can you see me okay? Can you hear me okay now?
Still frozen, but I'm worried about crashing the router, and that's a half-an-hour mess to fix.
Oh.
So maybe we'll just leave your video off and just use your audio.
Yes, see if you can hear me. Can you hear me okay now?
All right, that's fine. Let's just use the still picture. I don't want to take the router down. Then you can edit this out. All right, let's just do it audio on, and then you get.
Okay, that sounds great.
Okay.
So, tell us about that movie. The movie was, based off of, your life, and tell us a little bit more about that movie.
Well, one thing I really liked in the HBO movie Temple Grandin is they showed how my visual thinking works. That was shown absolutely accurately. And they also showed all the projects that I built. Another thing I really liked is they explain it gives insight into how I think. But not every autistic person's a visual thinker. I explain that in my book, Visual Thinking. I'm a visual thinker, think in pictures. But another kind of autistic is a mathematical thinker who thinks in patterns. And then there's some that are extreme word thinkers. They'll know every fact about golf or basketball or James Bond movies or some other thing that they're really interested in.
So the visual thinking is what led, and a lot of the movie is about this. But you really transformed the livestock industry, and were a real proponent of the humane treatment of livestock and how they go to slaughter. And that visual thinking that you have was like truly a gift. So a lot of times, people are thinking of autism and the deficits that a person has as a result of that, but your visual thinking was an absolute true gift to you. Is that right?
Well, yes. And I've done a lot of work in construction and people that invent mechanical equipment. I worked with skilled tradespeople in metalworking that had multiple patents on mechanical devices that were definitely autistic. And one of the worst things that schools have done is taken the skilled trade stuff out. Some states are putting it back in now. And I just got sent an article that a lot of people in the construction industry are probably mildly neurodivergent, maybe ADHD, dyslexic, or autistic. Yeah, that's definitely true. I spent 25 years in construction, so it's definitely true. You see, we need these skills. We need the skills.
The trades are important, and I've heard you speak about that before. Yes, some people are going to go to a 4-year university. Some people are going to get a PhD. Some people are going to get a master's. But some people might just need a certification or, work in skilled trades. And that is something that is going away. And a lot of the neurodivergent brains are really, really great in these skilled trades. That is a very valid point. Do you have any advice for parents to getting their kids? We have a lot of parents that we serve that may say, I'm not sure that my child is a candidate for college. Do you have advice for getting them involved in these types of skilled trades?
Well, I just talked to an entrepreneur yesterday that's working on new energy things. He was not the best student. And sometimes these innovators can just see things. You see a solution to a problem. You don't just talk about it. And we need our visual thinkers, but we also need our mathematical thinkers. Because what I found in the food processing industry, my kind of mind and the shop people and the skilled trade would invent all types of mechanical equipment. You'd have a draftsman with a 1-semester class in drafting laying entire factories out. And then your degreed engineer would do the boilers and refrigeration. That requires a lot more mathematics. Well, I just read today, in my brand new Wall Street Journal today, that Boeing's top management was too separated from the factory. Yeah, word thinkers. Yeah, they forgot to put the bolts in that door. Yeah.
You were talking about that the plane that had the door failure, and it was just a matter of bolts not being put in there, and the difference of thinking of it.
They weren't put in there, or they weren't put in there properly, and you see, the thing I'm emphasizing in a lot of the things I do is that we need the different kinds of thinkers, because when I did my book, Visual Thinking, I've got right here, I did the rough drafts that were kind of disorganized, and Betsy Lerner, my super verbal co-author, she smoothed everything out, organized my writing. You see, that's an example of complementary skills. We need all the different kinds of skills.
For sure. You were named, of course, one the top 100 most influential people in the world in the heroes category. Of course, the movie, the Temple Grandin movie, was subject to an Emmy and Golden Globe winning biographical film. And I do encourage, like I said, it was one of the best movies. I do encourage it. Anybody that's listening, if you've not seen that Temple Grandin movie, you'll be glad you did. You've really been an outspoken proponent of autism rights and neurodiversity movements. Tell us about some of your work in those areas.
Well, I've tried to just give parents really good information. I just talked about my early childhood program, and how did people get asked me how I got into the cattle industry? I got exposed to it. We got to get kids out exposed to a lot more stuff. How to get interested in horses and cattle? I was exposed to them in high school. It's that simple. And I had some very good teachers. I can't emphasize enough the importance of good teachers. An excellent speech teacher, wonderful elementary school teacher, my science teacher who gave me projects and got me motivated to study. I still can't do algebra. I'm an extreme visual thinker, and I can't do algebra. And some of the shop people I worked with couldn't do algebra either. But they have multiple patents. And the stuff that they've patented, even though the patents are expired now, it's still being used by the industry. It's just pure visual thinking stuff.
Well, and that's encouraging though, because a lot of these kids, ADHD on the autism spectrum. To your point, a lot of them are great in math and they're going to be great future engineers, no question.
Yep, that's right.
But the ones that aren't great in math are really, really struggling. In fact, some of them are so bad in math that they think that they could never go to college because they're so bad.
Well, I think
because they struggle so much in that.
We need to look at some of these math requirements. How about say, okay, if you want to go the STEM route, you have to take algebra, geometry, and calculus. But let's say you want to go the skilled trades route. Why don't you take business math? So you don't lose your shop taking out a stupid loan you shouldn't have taken out. Might be more helpful.
I heard you give some advice to parents once, really to lean in towards the skills of their child. So, a lot of parents really are stressed that they're struggling in math or a particular subject. But your advice is really to bolster and lean into what they're great at and build upon that and not worry as much. And
like when I was a little kid, I would just draw the same horse head all the time. But mother broadened that. Let's draw the whole horse. Let's draw his saddle, draw his stable. You want to take that interest and broaden it so it's not so fixated. I've seen kids that are super good with Legos, but they're not graduating to tools. Another really big problem. The other problem we've got with autism is you've got such a broad range. You're going from Einstein, no speech until age 3, to somebody who can't dress themselves, and they have other very severe neurological problems on top of the autism. They're all given the same name. You see where if you're dyslexic, it's a problem with reading. ADHD, a problem with attention. Those are much more narrowly defined. But I'm seeing too many parents that don't think their kid can do anything. And everything's done for them. I'm seeing 16-year-olds that are totally verbal, never gone shopping by themselves. That's ridiculous. They've never ordered food by themselves. That is completely ridiculous. And even the nonverbals can do more than what you think they can do. Some of them can learn to type, even though they don't speak. Some of them can learn to do jobs. They too are often underestimated.
Yeah, I think that is a very, very fair point. And I know that you have your website, the templegrandin.com, which I, would say is great advice for parents. You have a lot of great tips and advice out there on the templegrandin.com website. And I know, now, do you have another movie coming out? Did I hear that?
Oh, yes, it's called An Open Door, and it's made by John Festerman and John Bernard at Colorado State, and it mainly covers my work as a professor. My later work. It's a really, really good movie, where the HBO movie covers how I started, shows the projects. So it's sort of like the second chapter would be that my adult professional life is what's shown in The Open Door.
Right. That makes sense. So the open door is coming out, and that is exciting. So we'll look forward to watching that. And again, the Temple Grandin movie on the HBO network. Um, you've got 17 books out there on autism, but some of the more recent ones is your visual thinking book, different kinds of minds, a guide to your brain,
yeah, the different kinds of
autism,
minds is my young readers version. It's basically an abridged version of visual thinking. It's got some cool pictures in it. Publisher wouldn't let me put pictures in the original book. They said it was too expensive. And but all the important, if let's say somebody reads different kinds of minds and never see the other book, they're going to get all the main points. Because I can tell you right now, and they made me cut the reference list. I did not cut out any of this stuff on how people think. I cut the school policy stuff out.
You had a book called The Way I See It, and it's what parents and teachers need to know. Tell us a little bit about that book as well.
Well, that's a lot of little short articles of just practical things that parents can do. I want to keep things practical. We have a lot of low-income parents. And one of the big problems I'm seeing is these kids that are fully verbal are not making the transition to work. So we don't have paper routes anymore. I get my Wall Street Journal delivered here, but a grown-up does it. And what can we do to make paper routes substitutes? We could do walking the neighbor's dog. It's important for these kids to do a job for a boss that's outside the family. It's the next door neighbor's dog, a church volunteer job. These are things that cost nothing to implement. Another thing that can be implemented is when the kids are 7 or 8, put on their good clothes and be little party hostess and hosts at the parents' parties. We need to start teaching work skills young. They're not the same as academic skills. And the instant they're legal, they need to start getting real jobs. And I want to do, there's 2 accommodations we need to do. I want to avoid the chaos of the McDonald's takeout window. Multitasking chaos. Let's avoid that. The other thing is written instructions for jobs where there's a sequence that you have to do. Make it in a pilot's checklist format. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4 for closing out the cash register, for example. Because just yakking that out doesn't work. Those are 2 very simple accommodations that will improve.
So I'm going to repeat that back. Written instructions and like a pilot's checklist. I mean, you talked about this before, a pilot's checklist. They have a checklist, step 1 through however many, of exactly what they do from the time they get into the cockpit to the time that the plane takes off the ground.
Well, they have to check certain systems in the plane. And you can look it up for the little Cessna plane. There's about 10 items on it. And for the big planes, there's a bunch of other items. You have like pre-takeoff, the stuff you check. Pre-taxi, stuff you check. Pre-takeoff, the stuff you check. And they cluster these checklists. So there's 7 or 8 things in each section of it. You don't just throw a 100-item checklist at a pilot. It's broken up into sections. And let's say I'm working in construction and they want me to build certain stuff. Let me just write down what you want me to build each day. Because it's been jobs lost, electrician's apprentice and a fence building job, where they just went yakety yak, 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 and the guy built the wrong fences. If they had just taken 2 minutes to write it down, that would not have happened.
Temple, I think about this from a parent's perspective, that oftentimes we say something like this as a parent. Go upstairs, put your pajamas on, brush your teeth, lay your clothes out for tomorrow, and get in bed. And the ADHD brain or the autistic brain gets up the stairs and thinks, what was I supposed to do again? They're not trying to make the parent mad, but we, haphazardly, laid out all of these, things that they needed to do and didn't put it in writing. And, they're thinking about getting up the stairs and not falling on the stairs. And then they get up there and they forget. So even simple daily household tasks and things like that.
Simple stuff like that you could put in a checklist format. But there's a lot of jobs that would be saved by doing that, because I have bosses have told me, well, I got so frustrated. Oh, I explained to this guy 5 times how to clean the ice cream machine, and he can't remember it. Well, you should have a checklist. Disassembly steps, cleaning steps, reassembly steps. 3 sections on the
Exactly.
checklist.
So one thing I want to ask you before we go today, obviously you are very, very well spoken, and you have spoke to crowds all over the world, in person, all over. You know, Talk to us about your early days. You said you didn't even speak till 4. I mean, I think some parents. Do you have any piece of advice for some of these parents where they may have a child that is nonverbal, and they're not hopeless, but they're losing hope? Talk to us about the severity of how you were when you were younger, and hope for the parents that are their kids are still getting where they're going.
Well, I was very severe when I was young, very, very severe. Now, the doctor checked me out for epilepsy, and that fortunately was negative, which that definitely improves prognosis if you don't have epilepsy. But I have parents that get very frustrated. So am I doing the right thing for the kid? Now, the worst thing you can do for a 2-year-old that's not talking is to do nothing and let them zone out on electronics. That's what you should not do. Let's say you're in an area where you can't get services. Well, then you better get some grandmother volunteers in the community to work with this kid. You got to start working with them. You've just got to. And I find some teachers have the knack to engage these little nonverbal kids in little turn-taking games of all kinds. That's the first step of engagement. But you got a kid that's not
What
talking.
is the oldest age that you've seen somebody that maybe was nonverbal that began to speak? Have you seen a lot of that? Like, have you seen late teenage years where they have historically been mostly nonverbal? And what is your thoughts on that?
Well, there's been a few rare cases where nonverbal teenagers started to talk. But I was nonverbal till 4. There'll be some that'll be nonverbal till 5. The longer they go non-speaking, the harder it is to get them to speak. But you've got to give them a method to communicate, because I can remember the frustration of not being able to communicate. And you can have a nonverbal individual that's got a hidden painful medical problem, and he can't tell you about it.
Right.
It's got to have.
So how do we balance the technology and I've seen communication apps for iPads and other communication apps like that, but how do we balance that, giving them the avenue for communication, perhaps electronically, while not going off the deep end of electronics and creating that crutch?
Well, I'm sorry about interrupting. This is one of the problems I have. I have a slow processor speed, and I can't time breaking into the conversations.
Okay,
I know it's
no worries.
And this is I have a slow processor speed. Now, most of those apps are set up that they don't, it isn't like watching videos, so they don't tend to play on those. And they need to have that for communication. You could also just have a simple card with pictures on it. And you can have that iPad set up that's not connected to the internet, in some cases. But what you don't want is just zoning out, watching endless videos, playing endless video games, because you need the skills. And but parents will call me. Parents call me up very, very worried. They got a 3-year-old, and are they doing the right thing? Now you got to get enough hours of therapy. Probably about 20 hours a week is plenty. And I always will ask the parent, is your child progressing? And progression for a 3-year-old would be more speech, more ability to wait and take turns at games, and more skills like eating with utensils. Now, is he making progress? If he's making progress, you're doing the right thing. Maybe slow, but as long as you're making progress.
That makes sense. Tell us, if we have teenagers on the spectrum or ADHD, do you have some advice of any, particular trades or training or exposure to some of these trades that you're talking about, of how to get started with that if you have a parent that would like to get their kids plugged into something and more of these learning opportunities?
Well, let's start with little kids with a play school workbench at age 4. And then Legos. Yeah, let's get started with making things. When I was a little kid, if you could make it out of cardboard, I made it. And then in 2nd grade, I was using a hammer, screwdriver, and a pliers. Then you introduce tools, and you have to teach them how to use them safely. But I'm seeing too many teenagers building elaborate stuff with Legos, and they've not been introduced to tools. You see, that ought to be done before the high school skilled trades classes. I was taking shop in 5th grade.
Wow. Okay. So
that was one of my favorite
makes
classes, and the school just offered that.
And one thing that we do encourage parents, Temple, the vocational rehab, they have that available all throughout the United States for individuals with a disability that have impediments to employment. And services can start as early as age 14. So we do encourage people to get involved with vocational rehab. And we also have heard of like apprenticeships and other programs like through the Department of Labor for individuals with disabilities. And those are some examples as well. And they may not get paid. Who cares? If they're being exposed, to a trade, they're learning, they're growing, and it may end up being a career for them. And we have plenty of families that we serve who have kids on the autism spectrum, adult kids on the autism spectrum, nonverbal, that have jobs and they're doing quite well. So I think that is
that's right.
Definitely
there are
encouraging.
some nonverbals doing really well in jobs. And then some of them can learn to just type on the iPad using like a text messaging program. And there's always old half-broken electronics around that could be repurposed for that.
Yes, for sure. Well, before we go today, I just want to share with others, and you guys will be able to find this on our YouTube channel later. The podcast is going to be out there. It's going to be on the YouTube channel. But we have a Ask Temple webinar today going from 12 to 1. And if you missed it and you want to hear it, it is going to be on the Consolidated Planning Group YouTube channel. And this is going to be a different format that we normally do. We ask people to submit their questions. We have more questions than we'll ever get to today, but we're going to do our best. Where it's just going to be a Q&A with you and I and questions that parents had submitted to you. So we're excited to do that with you this afternoon. But before we go, can you tell us about your most recent book, Visual Thinking? What is that about? Can they get that on Amazon, or where do they get that?
It's definitely available. Visual Thinking, Hidden Gifts of People Who Think in Pictures, Patterns, and Abstractions. It is available on Amazon. And the main thing I talk about is the different kinds of thinking. You see, most people are mixtures of different kinds of thinking. For example, I'm an extreme object visualizer. All my memories are like little phone photos, and I can search my database. And then you have the visual spatial mathematical pattern thinker. They don't think so much in pictures, they think in patterns. And that's the little autistic kid that's brilliant in math in 3rd grade, needs to be moved ahead in math. Then you have the autistic word thinker, the facts mind. And they'll know every movie star for certain types of movies that they're interested in. So let's talk about the jobs that can work with the different kinds of minds. For me, it would be skilled trades, art, working with animals, and photography. I have seen a lot of photographers, both still and video and motion picture photographers, that are probably on the spectrum. Now you have pattern thinkers, degreed engineer, chemist, computer programmer. And one of the problems I'm seeing right now with the math kids, you might have a little 3rd grader that's brilliant in math, and the bureaucratic stuff at the school will not allow that kid to take more advanced math. And then they turn into gigantic behavior problems and get all kinds of terrible labels when that 4th grader needs to be given that algebra book. I can't do algebra. But then there's another kid where an algebra book will open up a door. There's the famous mathematician, Katherine Johnson. One thing that was done right with her is her math education was moved ahead. You got a little 3rd grader that's bored, let's just bring a high school math book in and let the kid do it in the 3rd grade classroom. And then your word thinker, the kind of jobs they would be very good at is what I call specialized retail. And there's been some real successes with selling new cars, selling phones, selling sporting goods, business insurance, and specialized financial products. Because this is where you help the customer find the right product for them, not just try to jam the most expensive stuff down their throat. And that some of that's been successful. So you see, with autism, you tend to get the extreme of the different kinds of minds. Where, okay, the entrepreneur I talked to yesterday on Zoom, working on energy, mostly a visual thinker. He had some trouble with math, but he managed to get through engineering. But the math was hard. And we need to take the thing the kid's good at, develop it, broaden it. Well, just in the last 2 weeks, I've heard about 3 mathematics super smart kids turning into gigantic behavior problems because they weren't given the harder math. Go get an algebra book out of the attic and give it to that kid. It has the right price. It's free. Or you can pick them up used on Amazon for like $5.
For sure, for sure. That is really good advice. So go deeper, pick up Temple's book, Visual Thinking. Think about, what do you really know? Who is your child? Where do they fall as far as the thinkers are concerned, and the gifts that they have as a result of the way they think, and grow, and really grow those skills, as I think what we've heard from you today, Temple. Temple, it has certainly been my pleasure being here with you today. I certainly look forward to our Q&A that we are going to do in a little bit, but you are certainly an inspiration to so many. You've got a lot of good, practical, I can implement this right now advice to parents. And as a parent, I have 4 kids and 2 with disabilities. And as a parent, I call it the relentless pursuit of information, of what else can we do as a parent? How can we help?
Well, just give practical information. The other thing that comes up all the time, and I talked to a lady yesterday outside the post office, her 9-year-old didn't have many friends. And I emphasized to her the importance of friends who shared interests. That's where these kids are going to have friends. For me in high school, it was riding horses with other kids. Friends who shared interests, maybe being in the school band if the kid is musically inclined. But that's where they're going to get friends. Fellow movie buffs about certain genres of movies. Friends who shared interests. And that's how they get friends.
That's exactly right. Such great advice. Well, thank you, Temple, for being here with us today. And I thank you on behalf of the parents that will listen to this. This is certainly exactly what we had in mind.
Okay, great to talk to you.